Okay, so let's go ahead and go over these. Alright, so the first one, you can assume that this is drawn to scale because it doesn't say that it's not. So you know that x is something bigger than 90 because that's obviously more than a right angle. So if you are looking for 3 times x, you're going to get something that's bigger than 3 times 90, which is 270. So right away you can estimate your way down to just D or E. You know, D or E has to be the right answer. If you actually find x, since these form what we call a linear pair, together they make a straight line, it means you have to add up to 180. You can actually find x. X is 150, and so 3 times that is 450. Yes. So if you chose answer choice C, then you fell for a gotcha there, because the question is, what's 3x, not what's x. Yes. So be sure you take your time on those easy ones. Don't rush through them trying to get to the medium and hard. Okay, so the medium. Dan, Laura, and Jane went grocery shopping. Dan spent 3 times as much as Laura and half as much as Jane. If they spend a total of $50 on groceries, how much did Jane spend? So this is a good one to practice our plugging in the answer choices and also to estimate a little bit. So you know that if all 3 of them together, Dan, Laura, and Jane, all 3 together spent a total of $50, probably doesn't really make sense that Jane would have spent 45 of those dollars. So you can kind of estimate that E is probably not right. Once you start filling in some numbers, you can kind of go from there. Let's just plug in the answer choices. So let's say, so we want to try D? Okay, so let's say that Jane spent $30, because that's what the answer choices are. They're Jane. So this says Dan spent 3 times as much as Laura and half as much as Jane. So that means that Dan would have spent half as much, so 15. And since he spent 3 times as much as Laura, that means Laura only spent 5. Do those add up to 50? Yes, so D is the right answer. Okay, and then the last one, in the circle above with center O, the radius of the circle is equal to the length of a side of the square. If the shaded region represents 2 semicircles inscribed in the square, the ratio of the area of the shaded region to the area of the circle is what? Okay, so just estimating, are there any answer choices that look like they don't really make sense? A and D, right? It looks like to me more than a 16th, but not 2/3, right? So probably not A or E. It doesn't even really look to me like half of a circle, so I would probably also eliminate a half. And even if you didn't know how to work the problem from there, at least you've given yourself the opportunity to guess between B and C and which one it looks more like to you. You can actually figure this one out. If the radius of the circle, so the radius of the big circle, which, what do you want to make that?
8.
Alright, we'll say it's 8. So we'll say the radius of the big circle is 8, is equal to the length of a side of the square. So that means the square has sides of 8. Right. Then what is the area of the circle? Well, to find the area of a circle, you do pi r squared. So the area of the big circle is 64 pi. These 2 shaded pieces, if you put them together, they would form one small circle with a radius of 4, right? It would be half of the side of, because the side of the square is also the diameter of that little circle. So this little circle that you're making out of these 2 shaded parts has a radius of 4. So its area would be 16 pi. So if you do 16 pi over 64 pi, you'll get 1/4. Okay. But you could probably estimate that that was a 1/4. You should at least be able to estimate down to either B or C and then It looks like more than an eighth to me. But you could guess. Even if you didn't know how to set the problem up, you could guess. All right. Okay. So, some tips for plugging or estimating happiness. With geometry, especially on hard questions, the answer choices need to be translated into numbers that you can work with. So that last one that I showed you, I didn't work with R as the radius. I worked with a number. I made it 8. Translate pi to a little bit more than 3 when you're estimating. The square root of 2, translate that to a little bit more than 1. The square root of 3, a little bit less than 2. Practice estimating a lot, even if you're going to work out the problem. And I did that. You know, there was times that I still worked the problem, but I estimated to eliminate answer choices. The farther apart the answer choices, the bigger opportunity for eliminating answers by estimating. If the figure is not drawn to scale, redraw it if you can, using whatever measurements they provide. If you can't redraw it, don't estimate. If two things look about equal, you can't assume that they're exactly equal unless they give you information that would let you assume that. And trust what your eyes tell you. Okay, so we've learned some very basic techniques. We learned plugging in just as a general strategy, plugging in your answer choices, and estimating. To study effectively using these techniques, you need to practice plugging in. Plug in whenever and wherever you can. Analyze your work. When you're working these problem sets, you're working the quick quizzes in class, pay attention to why you're missing the problems. Not just that you missed them, but why. So that you can avoid making the same mistakes over and over. Do all of the practice problems. If you're going to do them as though you're taking the real thing. Practice with the same focus and intensity you'll need on the actual SAT. So you should be able now to go in. You should have been able to do problem set 1 after yesterday, and now you could do problem set 3 and 5. That's over plugging in answer choices and estimating. These are all, I mean, obviously this class isn't for grades. This is all just for your own benefit. But I will tell you that the people that have raised their score, 80, 100 points, whatever, have done the practice problems. They've practiced at home. You're not going to raise your score 150 points just sitting in this class and listening to me 2 days a week for the next 5 weeks. You have to put forth a little bit of effort outside of the class and do problems on your own. So I'm here. I'll be here the rest of the week if you have questions over any of the problem sets. We're done early today, but next week we'll do the next set of stuff, and we'll actually get into actual math and not just strategies.